How big of a role have we just received on the global stage with the addition of the new 6 members?
I think, thank you for having me. But I do think as South Africa, we have quite a lot on our plate with this addition of the new members. And it's important to preface this by saying that this move or this addition of the new countries really shouldn't be received as an anti-West move, but it really is a move that seeks to enhance strategic interests. I mean, the addition of these new countries really positions South Africa and the BRICS countries in a very good footing in terms of really having liquidity, specifically in the new development bank. It really puts us in a good footing in terms of being able to enhance the voices of the Global South. We know that as it stands right now, the Global South is not adequately represented in the global system. This comes in institutions such as the Security Council and the UN. These are institutions such as the WTO and all the financing institutions. So really bringing on new players that can enhance the voice is always a good thing for the BRICS. But of course, there are some concerns.
And what would you say some of those concerns are? Because I was just speaking to Professor John Strimler from BRICS earlier on, and he indicated that it's an odd mix of countries.
Of course.
You've got tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran that were recently resolved, with China mediating that. You've got human rights violation issues and concerns. You've got uncertainty in Ethiopia, one of the biggest states there. I mean, it's an interesting mix, and I want you to maybe just highlight some of the concerns you think might be there.
Absolutely, and I think the concerns have always existed in the BRICS, and that's not something we should miss. I mean, even with the original 5 countries, there were tensions between India and China, but you've never heard that India is not going to China to attend a conference and vice versa. I think what makes the BRICS very unique is a set of principles that guide their cooperation. And I mean, the criteria hasn't been released in terms of what, necessitated the addition of these particular countries. But I think that the tensions will always remain. What becomes important that these countries are able to cooperate nonetheless, despite the considerations. But I mean, some of the challenges that I've been hearing around the center is this endorsing non-democratism? And I think, is this endorsing the violation of human rights? And what is important to note in terms of the principles of the BRICS is that they clearly define themselves, and they clearly say that they only cooperate in issues of mutual interest, and where there's no mutual interest, they revert to national positions. And I mean, this was very clear in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, where there was no convergence, and they all reverted to national policies. So I do think that's a principle that's going to take them forward as they continue to cooperate.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to strike a balance, though, because with the coming together of these nations on a set of certain principles, you still cannot ignore what the other nations would do, because ultimately you are choosing to have some form of beneficial relationship with a country that may be synonymous with human rights violation and non-democratic practice. So you think that it would be beneficial going forward, but I wonder if people wouldn't be concerned and raise further concerns around that, certainly in the medium term.
Absolutely, and I think we have history to assist us in that. There has been similar situations where we found ourselves, specifically as South Africa, where we've been caught in a very precarious positions because some of our other BRICS members have been caught or have been involved in some things that would be criticized here back at home. But what has been the backlash? What has been the response from government? It reverts back to the principles of we only cooperate in areas of mutual interest, and there's non-interference in domestic affairs. And that's something that was outlined from the get-go when BRICS started. I don't see why it would stop now.
Yeah.
I genuinely do not.
Yeah. Let's speak about this partnership with these 11 countries now, a strategic one that will contribute to the development of their respective nations. How do you foresee that sustainable growth and mutual benefit happening going forward between the 11 of them?
I think we cannot ignore that with the additions of these new countries, 6 of the biggest 9 oil producers in the world are now members of BRICS.
Yes.
That's just one. I think what's going to be important, especially for a country like South Africa, is really to have strategic objectives and act on them. We know at the moment that our trade with other BRICS countries has enhanced because of this formation, but some of the quality of the trade leaves a lot to be desired. So I think it is going to be very important for South Africa to be very pragmatic and really set out its objectives pretty clearly. Otherwise, we are going to get lost in this group grouping of now 10
and that's
to 11
what I wanted
countries.
to bring up with you. My apologies for coming in there, but South Africa becoming a little bit more intentional and aggressive in its position within BRICS. It cannot be that we are still importing a lot of China's goods. How do we create our own manufacturing capacity? How do we say this is South Africa and this is what we're selling and you will be buying? How do we become more aggressive as South Africa at the risk of not getting lost in the other 10 countries there?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question because it touches upon some of the critical things that were raised on Monday when the Business Forum was meeting upstairs. And it really, one, is about creating value addition, not just being about natural resources, but actually creating a value addition. But I also think major concerns that were raised on Monday is the regulatory framework. How do we actually ensure that we have an enabling environment for us to be able to export more of our value-added products? How do we actually bring Africa along with us? And it's important that we really do wrap up the Africa Continental Free Trade Area negotiations as a continent, because with South Africa, it's not just only about South Africa, but it's also about the African agenda as well. We need to get our business in order, and we actually need to converge more with the private sector to fix some of the issues that they've raised.
Do you not think then that Nigeria being picked to be part of that table might have helped with taking Africa to the rest of the world along with South Africa and the other BRICS nations?
That would mean that we don't believe that Egypt and Ethiopia can get us there. And so it's pretty controversial.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a bit of regional competition with all the regions of the BRICS, And the countries that were selected to join must have been carefully considered, considering all aspects. We wait for the criteria to be released to us so we can see what informed Egypt and Ethiopia. But I do think that there is also a little bit of a regional tussle, and South Africa still wants to maintain being a bit of a, a leader within the BRICS as well. One would assume.
Yeah, and I suppose with that, we cannot forget the trade area that you've just mentioned, the Africa Free Trade Area, and making sure that it's something that is actively being a part of the economies, because I think at this rate it's something that the African continent is still struggling quite a bit with.
So I think it's not so much of a struggle. I think we need to give ourselves a bit of credit. We have this very aspirational agenda that we're setting out to do. It's very ambitious what we're setting out to do. We have a group of 55 countries that we're trying to get on board to actually have instruments that facilitate trade within the continent, but also where we can stand as a market to actually trade with the world as well. It's a momentous endeavor that we are trying to do, and I think just once we're done with the negotiations, we actually are set out to actually do something quite amazing as a continent. So I do think that credit is due there somehow, even though there are challenges, and there will be challenges, but there is some credit that should be due to our continent.
Yeah, as they say, I suppose, what a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
From SAYAB, unpacking that announcement made earlier.